Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good day to everyone. Today we will be presenting the summary of our research title, The Role of Podcast Listening in Improving English Vocabulary Among Students in College Professional Marasari Iskandar. Before we begin, allow me to introduce our group members. I am Junida Mia binti Zahirai, ID number SEC23070027, and together with me,
I am Dini Kesatina Ahmad Tamizi, ID number SEC 23070020.
And I am Anissa Arifka binti Syamsul Barin, ID number SAC 23070067.
I am Rokali Sasuke binti Muhammad Yazid, ID number SEC 23070042.
I am Shafia Aliyah binti Muhammad Azwan. My ID number is SEC 23070224.
Alright, now let's begin. Our research explores how listening to English podcasts can support students in enhancing their vocabulary in a more engaging and flexible way compared to traditional methods. Throughout this presentation, we will be summarized Chapter 1, 2, and 3, which cover the introduction, literature review, and research methodology. Now let's begin with Chapter 1. This chapter introduced the research which focuses on examining the role of podcast listening in improving English vocabulary among Diploma in English Communication DEC students at College Professional Marasari Iskandar KPMSI. In the era of digital learning, podcasts have become a popular tool for students to access authentic language input outside the classroom. However, many students still struggle with vocabulary despite years of learning English. Traditional methods like memorizing word lists are often seen as boring or ineffective, leading to poor retention and lack of interest. Next. Podcasts, on the other hand, offer a more engaging and natural way to learn vocabulary by exposing students to real-life conversation, storytelling, and discussions. This chapter outlines the background of the study, explains the vocabulary challenges faced by students, and highlight how podcast listening could bridge this gap. The research objective and question are also presented to guide the study, along with the significance of the research, which lies in its potential to provide students and educators with modern, flexible, and practical methods to improve English language learning outcome. Next, for Chapter 2, I will pass to my other group member.
Okay, so for Chapter 2, we will be moving on to literature review. So in literature review, this chapter reviews about the past literature related to English vocabulary development and the use of podcasts as educational tools. Vocabulary plays a crucial role in mastering the English language. It begins by highlighting the importance of vocabulary in mastering English, particularly among college students who require a strong need for vocabulary skills for academic and professional success. This chapter also explains that vocabulary is not only essential for communication, but also affects reading, writing, listening, and communication. Next. It then discussed how listening activities, especially related to this topic, is repeated and contextual listening, which contributes to vocabulary acquisition. Podcasts provide authentic, real-life language exposure in context, and also several studies show that using podcasts enhances vocabulary retention, learner autonomy, and engagement. So, lastly, in this literature review, this chapter emphasizes that podcasts offer flexible learning where learners can pause, replay, and control their pace. Learners can also choose from a wide range of topics that suit their interests, while these features also align with modern preferences and supports independent study. So I'll pass to my other group mates.
Okay, so for the Chapter 3, which is methodology, Chapter 3 outlines the research design and methodology used to conduct the study. A quantitative approach is adopted to measure the impact of podcasts on students' listening comprehensions. The study involves a total of 120 of diploma in English communication students, with 20 participants selected from each semester, from semester 1 until semester 6. Stratified sampling is used to ensure balanced representation across different academic levels. The primary instruments used in the study are pre-test and post-test, designed to assess changes in listening skills after the use of podcast-based learning materials. The chapter further details the data collection procedures, which include administering this test, introducing selected educational podcasts, and tracking student responses. It also describes how the data will analyze to determine whether podcast usage has a major effect on comprehension levels. This methodology ensures a systematic and reliable approach, allowing the researcher to draw a clear conclusions about the effectiveness of podcasting as a teaching tool. By structuring the research in this way, the study aims to provide a practical evidence that can inform the future language teaching strategies. These instruments that are used in this methodology is open-ended and closed-ended questions, as well as semi-structured interview consisting of 10 main questions. Next, I will pass to my group member, Kalisa Sofia.
So firstly, our study investigates students' podcast listening habits. So we aim to understand how often students engage with podcasts and what kind of content they usually consume. So this will help us identify patterns in their listening behavior. So next, we look into the frequency of podcast use. This aspect is important to determine whether regular exposure to podcasts contributes to more effective vocabulary acquisition. So another key area we explore is students' perception of vocabulary learning through podcasts. So we want to find out how students feel about using podcasts as a tool to expand their English vocabulary, whether they find it effective, enjoyable, or even challenging. So to gain deeper insights into these areas, we will also conduct interviews. So these interviews are designed to explore students' personal experiences and learning strategies in more depth, especially focusing on how they believe podcasts help them enhance their vocabulary. So as for our research site, we have chosen College Professional Madrasah Iskandar or KPMSI. This location is ideal because the students are already familiar with English language learning and digital media, making them suitable participants for our study. So that's all from me. I pass to the another member.
To conclude, this research looks at how podcast listening can help BEC students at College Professional Marasel Iskandar improve their English vocabulary. We started by discussing the challenges students face in learning new words, especially with traditional methods like memorizing word lists. So podcasts offer a more fun and natural way to learn by exposing students to real conversations and stories. The literature review showed that podcasts can improve vocabulary because they provide real-life context that allow repeated listening and support independent learning. Studies also found that podcasts keep students more engaged and motivated. In our methodology, we use both surveys and interviews to collect data from 120 students across all 6 semesters. This helped us to understand both overall patterns and personal experiences in podcast learning. In short, this research is important because it suggests a modern, flexible tool for learning English vocabulary. If podcasts are used effectively, they can make vocabulary learning more enjoyable and meaningful for students today. That's all from us. Thank you.
Mm.